Welcome to the Numbers Game. I'm Cynthia Frelund, and Week 12 is here, and we have 12 more NFL games to break down based on key contextual stats, driving forecasted scores and player projections. As always, thank you for coming to hang out. It means a whole lot to me that you're choosing to spend some of your time and energy with me. Last week, my model went 9-5 straight up, and I had 6 wins both against the spread and on totals. That brings my season to 66.3 straight up, 50.9 ATS, and 52.5 on totals. This week, there are a good deal of potentially lopsided games, so I'm going to give some extra notes that are very much tailored to ATS probabilities in addition to those that are the regular model results that I always reference. Just so you know, I have several risk models running each week. I typically focus on the main one, which is who wins and why, along with confidence rankings as they relate to straight-up wins and losses. Without getting too much further into the weeds, I have different risk profiles geared towards optimizing for ATS picks, totals, and then different types of models that do deeper dives into in-game decisions, player matchups, and more. This week, I thought it would be fun to add in a few extra notes for you to consider from some of the additional models. This gives you options for how to approach the games, especially ATS. Let me know if that's cool or if it makes your head spin. I'm pretty much rooting hard for cool. Let's start with the game that's projected to be the most lopsided, which is Kansas City heading to Carolina to take on the Panthers. The Chiefs are 11-point favorites in a game where the total is 41.5 points. Right out of the gate, here's an interesting note from my in-game model from last week's loss to the Bills. Steve Spagnuolo did not use a spy on Josh Allen. Is this a regular season strategy to hold back a bit before a potential playoff matchup or something else? Only time will tell. Anyways, let's zoom out and look at the Chiefs' blitz in general to talk about this week's matchup. They blitzed at the third highest rate and generated a 17.2 percentage point increase when rushing an extra man. That is the 6th biggest increase in the league. Going one level deeper, when the Chiefs blitz, they've recorded the most unblocked pressures at 33, which drives their 39 overall unblocked pressures, and both of those are actually the most in the NFL. And the Panthers have allowed the 7th highest rate of unblocked pressure at 24%. Before their bye, the Panthers signed Chuba Hubbard to a big extension, and then he had a career day, rushing for 153 yards, with 71 coming as yards over expected against the Giants in Munich. That brings his season total to 214 RYOE, which is the 3rd most in the NFL behind just Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. This matchup is less favorable, though, because Kansas City's defense has allowed the 2nd fewest RYOE and contacted ball carriers before the line of scrimmage on the highest percentage of rush attempts. Bottom line, the Chiefs win 28-16, and this ranks first of the 13 games this week. This 12-point differential goes all the way past 14 in my ATS model. The Chiefs have averaged 6.7 plays per drive this season, and they have 24 scoring drives where they've had 10 or more plays. Those are both best in the NFL. They're also still best on third down, converting 52% of the time. Despite a 2-game losing streak, the Commanders are 10-point favorites at home against the Cowboys, and the total is 45 points. Want to know a stat that shows just how much respect offensive coordinators have for Micah Parsons? Opposing passers have released the ball 1/4 of a second quicker on average against the Cowboys defense when he's on the field versus off. It's 2.76 seconds versus 3.01. Maybe that sounds like a tiny number, but here's the context. 3.01 seconds would be the longest average time to throw in the NFL. It makes sense, though, especially given Parsons has a team-high 35 pressures, which is 10 more than the next closest Cowboy defender, despite missing 4 full games. You know who knows all about the problems Parsons can cause? Dan Quinn, which is likely why he'll double down on being happy when Cliff Kingsbury leans even more into the run on this one, especially if Jaden Daniels' ribs aren't 100% healed. This is strength on weakness. The Commanders have the 6th highest rushing success rate, and the Cowboys have allowed the highest rushing success rate, the 8th most carries of 10-plus yards, and have given up the most EPA per carry on design runs. Bottom line, I have a 12-point Washington win, and this ranks 2nd in confidence. One of the trends that Cliff Kingsbury offenses have exhibited in the past is a drop-off in production after Week 9, with the most notable difference, other than the 5.5 fewer points per game, being a doubling of turnover rate. As a head coach or coordinator, his offenses have gone from 0.8 to 1.5 giveaways per game on average after Week 9. Strong rushing success from the backs and quarterback helps decrease the odds of that trend continuing this season. The 3rd most lopsided game this week per Vegas is another divisional matchup, this time in Nashville, where the Texans are 8.5-point favorites over the Titans in a game where the over-under is 42. Tennessee and Houston are the second and third most penalized teams this season, but defensive notes are actually more interesting in this matchup. The Titans defense ranks top 2 in total defense and pass defense despite ranking 26th in scoring defense. They're the only team to allow points on every opponent red zone drive. As for Houston's defense, they have the third highest pressure rate, and when they get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, they allow the lowest success rate. Will Levis has the second fewest EPA per dropback when under pressure. Bottom line, another cover. Houston wins by 10, 27-17. Two fun facts to know here. One is that CJ Stroud has a 23.8 higher passer rating when Nico Collins is on the field this season. And two, all 5 of Nick Westbrook-Akina's receiving touchdowns have come since week 6, which is tied for third most over that span. Texans winning ranks third in confidence. Detroit has now reached historic win streak territory, winning 8 consecutive games for the first time since 1934 when they won 10. That is 90 years, by the way. The Lions head to Indianapolis as 7.5-point favorites, and the total is 51 points. One key Detroit data point is Jared Goff's results on intermediate passes, an area he's targeted on about 22% of his throws, the 12th highest rate in the league. Those are 10 to 19 air yard passes per next-gen stats. On such passes, he averages the most yards per attempt at 13.6, has the third highest expected points added per throw, and the 5th highest success rate. Indy's D has allowed the third highest EPA per dropback and the 6th highest success rate. This week, Amon-Ra St. Brown ranks 4th among wide receivers in my median projections, but has the highest upside of any receiver, in part because he and Goff have connected on every target thrown his way in 6 of 10 games this season, and because the Colts play the most zone at about 86%. Why does that matter, you say? Well, all of Goff's 9 interceptions have come against zone. Based on what seems to be the strategy of working out a lot of kinks, let's go back to the Jags game last week to kind of verify this. It's possible that they add a few extra passing plays, and St. Brown has the league's second highest team target share at 29%. One area the Colts could see success is the continued improved play of Anthony Richardson. Last week against the Jets, in his return to being the starter, he had his first pro game with a completion percentage over expected and a career-high 272 passing yards. 256 of those yards and a touchdown were all earned inside the pocket as well, which was an area that he struggled with prior to his starting quarterback reset. Before the reset, he completed just 47.4% of passes in the pocket, and against the Jets, that number was 78.3%. The direction is the key here, meaning improvement, because that is a very high number, which is both hard to sustain in general, and will also be no easy task because the Lions' defense is very stout, including remaining best on third down, allowing opponents to convert on only 30.4% of tries, and overall, they've held their opponents to the lowest passer rating allowed at 73.6. Bottom line, Detroit wins 29-21, and this ranks 4th highest in confidence. Dan Campbell said there's no better running back duo in the league, so let's look at that opportunity as well. Detroit's rushers are averaging 1.9 yards before contact per carry on designed runs, the third most. And Indy has allowed 3.4 yards after contact per carry on such runs, that is the 6th most. That adds up to 5.3 yards before the likes of Zaire Franklin and Nick Cross, who rank 2nd and 4th respectively in tackles this season. By the way, Franklin also ranks 2nd in run stops. We've eaten our veggies, so let's do a list. We need a little history this week, so let's do Model Citizen. This is where we see if history is going to be made or if it will have to wait till a different week. Number 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown has a receiving touchdown in 8 straight games, which is already the longest streak in Lions history, and one away from tying the longest in the entire NFL since 2000, which is A.J. Green in 2012. Does he do it this week? My model says yes. In 65% of simulations, he reaches the end zone. Number 2, Travis Kelce needs 1 receiving touchdown to set Kansas City's franchise record and join Antonio Gates as the only tight ends in NFL history to be a franchise's outright all-time leader in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. My model says yes in 49% of simulations. He's been targeted on 29% of routes since week 4. If you like risk, say yes, and you know I like risk. Number 3, Tua Tagovailoa is 6-0 in his career against the Patriots. Tua is one of 3 quarterbacks to be undefeated against the Pats, who've played them at least 5 times. John Elway leads the way with 10 wins. Does Tagovailoa extend his streak to 6? That is our next game. The Patriots at Dolphins, where the home team is a touchdown favorite and 46 points is the total. Drake May has been effective using his legs, earning 261 yards and a touchdown on 26 scramble attempts. He has 87 rushing yards over expected, in large part because he forces missed tackles at a 36% rate, and both of those numbers are good for the most in the NFL. This is strength on strength, though, because Miami's defense has allowed the second fewest such rushing yards over expected. Tua leads the league in completion percentage at 73.4 and also has the highest quick pass rate at 62%. Overall, Miami has kept their quarterback clean at the third highest rate, meaning the third lowest percentage of pressure. And that probability stays strong in this one, with New England only managing the ninth lowest pressure rate, despite Keon White having a career season. Bottom line, Miami wins 25-19, ranking 7th in confidence. The first time around in Week 5, Ramondre Stevenson was the main beneficiary of the Dolphins, allowing season highs in rushing yards per carry, rushing yards over expected, and by the way, overall, they still have allowed the 5th most such rushing yards at 160. Those are rushing yards over expected. But this time around, it's Devon Achane who's slated for the bigger day, especially on plays with motion, where he's earned the second most yards among running backs when in motion at 162. Want to know something wild? New England is 1-13 since 2023 when they've taken over 30 pass attempts. Want to know something else wild? Tampa has scored 20 or more points in 9 of 10 games this season. Only the Ravens and Bills have more such games. Maybe it's more wild that they are 2-8 following their bye since 2013, especially considering there was a Super Bowl season in there. But they are 5-point road favorites in New York this week in a game where the over-under is 41.5 points. On the Bucs side of things, Baker Mayfield has the third most offensive touchdowns in the league. He also has 5 games with 3 or more passing touchdowns, which is tied with Joe Burrow for the most in the NFL. And he has a 101.3 passer rating with 38 touchdowns to 11 interceptions when Mike Evans is on the field since 2023. And of course, that part's relevant because we are expecting Evans to return. The Giants do have the second most sacks, so it's also good to note that Mayfield has used quick passes at the 4th highest rate to the tune of the 5th highest success rate, with 12 touchdowns coming off of them, which is the most in the NFL. The Giants defense has allowed the 5th highest success rate on quick passes. As for the G-men, it's Tommy DeVito time, baby. Last season, he averaged 7.2 yards per attempt throwing outside the numbers, and 6 of his 8 passing touchdowns came on passes to those areas of the field, along with not throwing a single interception on 94 attempts. The Giants went 3-3 with DeVito as the starter last season. Bottom line, Bucs win 25-18, and this ranks 5th in confidence. It's worth noting that the Bucs have 2 not good streaks going, and one is that they've allowed 23 or more points in each of their last 6 games. The other is that they've allowed 375 yards in each of their past 4 games. Both rank most in the NFL. What is a good way to stop these skids? Run the football. The Bucs have averaged nearly 5 yards per run inside the tackles, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. The Giants have allowed 1.3 rushing yards over expected and the highest rate of 10-plus yard runs in between the tackles. Control the ball and limit the time the defense is on the field. That is the strategy. One more quick note here. In my ATS model, the Giants keep it closer. So if you're focused on playing it that way, keep that in mind. The game Vegas says is the closest in the early window is the Vikings at Bears, where Minnesota is just a 3.5-point favorite in Chicago, where they nearly pulled off the home upset of Green Bay last week. If we were to play that word association game and say blitz, I think almost everyone, at least everyone who listens to this, probably would say Brian Flores, because that is how much we've talked about him using this strategy. And let's keep that weekly trend going. They rank number 2 in blitz percentage heading into week 12. However, one thing to note, they have 23 sacks when not blitzing, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. Also, they only have a 4.4 percentage point increase in pressure rate when blitzing compared to not blitzing. That is the 5th smallest increase in the league this season. Bottom line, not all blitzes are created the same, or are they intended to do the same things. One key difference we saw in the Bears offense last week under new offensive coordinator Thomas Brown, nearly a half a second quicker time to throw for Caleb Williams. It was 2.9 seconds prior and 2.42 in week 11. Williams has the number 16, so basically the median EPA, at 11.6 with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions on sub 2.5 second passes. Compared to the second fewest EPA, it is negative 82 and 5 interceptions on passes that take more than 2.5 seconds before he throws them. The Vikings defense has allowed the fewest passing EPA and have a league-leading 8 interceptions on quick passes this season, so not a great matchup there. Bottom line, the Vikings take it 23-19. If the delta moves up, so if you go from 3.5 to 4 points, my delta is 4.4 points. So if you need to know if it does move between the time we are filming this and the time the game starts, my number is still larger than 4, in large part because of a big advantage that the Vikings defense has in the run game. The Bears have rushed about 54% of the time when their quarterback was under center. That ranks 14th, but the Vikings have allowed the lowest rushing success rate to that situation, to the run game when the quarterback is under center. And by the way, it remained pretty steady 53% of the time last week with Brown as the architect. So you can kind of count on that as something that hasn't changed. For me, this game ranks 10th in confidence. We need a list. Let's do count on it. It's officially late in the fantasy season, and there are a good number of home dogs and larger spreads again this week. So let's make a list of some of the players you can count on. The bigger name guys that you did draft early in fantasy, and you need them to see the end zone this week. We're going to do 3 from the games we've already covered and 1 that moves us forward. Last week, I was a little mediocre here, so time to get super serious. Number 1, Justin Jefferson. I get it. TJ Hawkinson is second on the team with 13 receptions since his season debut in week 9. And Jordan Addison, that little vulture, has 2 receiving touchdowns in his last 3 games. But Jefferson leads the NFL with 599 receiving yards against a single high this season. And the Bears use that tactic the 5th most often. Number 2, Devon Achane, who's the only player with 3 or more rushing touchdowns and 3 or more receiving touchdowns this season. He has 5 games with 100-plus scrimmage yards and 1 or more touchdowns this season, which already matches his total from last season. Let's surpass that total this week. Number 3, Nico Collins. I get it. He only had 4 receptions last week, but without L'Jarius Sneed, the Titans' pass defense is far more vulnerable. And number 4, Kenneth Walker against Arizona. I know what you're thinking. He's averaged a career low 56.5 rushing yards per game and just 4 yards per carry this season. But I said touchdowns here, and he's also had 7 rushing and 1 receiving in 8 games played this season. In fact, he's the first player in Seahawks history with 8 or more scrimmage touchdowns in each of his first 3 seasons. That brings us to the afternoon games. The Seahawks host the Cardinals and are favored by just 1 point in a game where the total is 47.5 points. Starting with the visitors, Cardinals right tackle Kelvin Beachum has allowed the lowest pressure rate among 34 qualified right tackles, and left tackle Paris Johnson Jr. is also in the top 3rd in this category. He's only allowed more than 3 pressures in a single game once in 10 games this season. Derek Hall and Boye Mafe will be the assignments this week, which will be challenging. However, it really helps that Kyler Murray is so great outside the pocket. He has the 4th most passing yards per attempt at 9.6 yards, the highest total EPA on such dropbacks, it is plus 16.4, and he's only been sacked 3 times outside the pocket and has exactly 0 interceptions. And for the home team, the Seahawks quarterback got his right tackle back last week, and Abraham Lucas allowed about half as much pressure as the rotation of his replacements. Even with other O-line changes, the short pass is a strength versus weakness situation here. Geno Smith has used these 0 to 9 air yard passes on about 45% of attempts and has the 2nd best success rate on them. Arizona has allowed the 5th highest success rate to them, and then factor in Jackson Smith and Jigba, who leads Seattle in short pass targets at 44 and also has the highest slot route percentage in the NFL at nearly 85%. The Cardinals have allowed the 6th most EPA to slot wideouts this season. Bottom line, Seahawks win by 2, 23-21. However, this only ranks 11th in confidence. In simulations where the Cardinals win, James Conner, who leads the league with 68 forced missed tackles, dominates a Hawks team that only misses tackles at the 11th lowest rate. In sims where the Seahawks win, they shut down Conner. Interesting note here, neither of the Seahawks starting linebackers from week 1, Jerome Baker or Tyrell Dodson, are even on the roster entering week 12. In week 11, Ernest Jones and rookie Tyrese Knight played over 80% of their snaps at linebacker. And since the Seahawks traded for Ernest Jones ahead of week 8, he has the 3rd highest run stop rate at 19.2% among linebackers. My favorite linebacker name in the league to say is in this next game, where Justin Sternad and the Broncos are 5.5-point road favorites in Vegas against the Raiders. The total is 41 points. The Broncos have run the 11th most often when their quarterback lined up under center, which has been on about 62% of plays. They average 4.3 yards per carry on those runs, which ranks 13th. However, in this matchup, they're likely to see that number increase, as the Raiders have allowed the most rushing yards over expected per carry on such runs. Also, Bo Nix has 4 games with a 70-plus completion percentage, 2 or more passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, which is tied with Dak in 2016 for the most such games by a rookie in the common draft era. 10 different Broncos players have a receiving touchdown this season, which is tied for the second most in the NFL. The Raiders have an incredibly special rookie tight end. Brock Bowers has 706 receiving yards this season, trailing only the Hall of Famer Mike Ditka for the most by a rookie tight end through their first 10 games in NFL history. He has 2 games with 10 or more receptions, which is tied for the most by a rookie tight end all time, and his 13 grabs last week set the rookie tight end single game reception record. Bottom line, Broncos get the road win 23-16, and this ranks 6th in confidence. The Broncos defense has pressured opposing quarterbacks at the 6th highest rate, and Gardner Minshew has the fewest EPA per dropback under pressure at negative 0.77 per dropback. Interesting tendency note here. Bo Nix has a 10-0 passing touchdown to interception ratio when he's pressured on fewer than 30% of his dropbacks in a game. The Broncos are 6-0 this season in that scenario, and the Raiders happen to be one of 5 teams this season with a pressure percentage below 30. Another game with pretty significant playoff implications in the afternoon window is at Lambeau Field, where the Niners come to town to face the Packers. Green Bay is favored by 2.5 points in a game where the total is 48 points. The Niners have the 2nd highest rushing success rate against light boxes. That's when 6 or fewer defenders are in the box. And they average the 4th most yards per carry at 5.9 against them. Green Bay has defended the run with a light box about 42% of the time and allowed both the 9th most rushing yards over expected and the 9th highest success rate. Jordan Love has averaged a league-high 9.5 yards per attempt when facing 4 or fewer pass rushers this season. That is 1 full yard more than the next closest quarterback. No team rushes 4 more than the Niners. Love has been so great here in part because he has been kept clean, seeing quick pressure on a league-low 5.5% of dropbacks versus 4 or fewer rushers. One thing to watch, though, Jordan Love has taken the 11th highest rate of intermediate pass attempts this season, but ranks 31st of 34 quarterbacks in success rate. He also has 4 interceptions on them. The Niners defense has 6 interceptions on intermediate passes and the 4th fewest EPA allowed per pass. It would seem we should see fewer intermediate passes in this one. Maybe try deep passes or try outbreakers like what worked for Geno last week, or inbreakers which worked for other people in weeks prior. But it's strange to keep seeing these intermediate passes when they aren't working. Anyways, I digress. Bottom line, Niners keep their playoff hopes alive 24-23, but this is 13th of 13 in confidence. George Kittle is the difference maker, though. He's caught 22 of 27 targets for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns when aligned as an inline receiver this season. He has 94 receiving yards over expected. That's the 2nd most in the NFL. And the Packers defense has allowed a 93.5 completion percentage along with a 72.4 success rate on passes targeted to inline receivers this season. Those are massive numbers, both of which happen to be the highest marks in the NFL. It's weekly wildcard time, our list of 5 lesser expected touchdown scorers. I'm talking about the guys who aren't in the top few at their position in terms of touchdown scoring. You didn't draft them around one of your fantasy league. Guys who have elevated end zone reaching odds this week. Number 1, Tyrone Tracy against the Bucs. The Bucs defense ranks 31st in yards per play allowed, and even though Tommy DeVito changes things, he doesn't change Tracy's ability to earn yards after contact. Number 2, Jackson Smith-Njigba against the Cardinals. Both the slot information and on those sub-10 air yard passes, advantage to the Seahawks and JSN. Number 3, Austin Eckler, who leads all running backs in yak over expected. The Cowboys defense has given up a league-high 12.7 yards after the catch per reception to opposing running backs this season. That is the most by a defense in a season since 2016. Number 4, Kareem Hunt. This holds pretty much no matter what we hear about Isaiah Pacheco's return. And number 5, a rushing touchdown for Jalen Hurts against the Rams. The Eagles are 3-point road favorites at SoFi against the Rams on Sunday night. The total is 50.5 points. Jalen Hurts has used a deep pass at the 10th highest rate this season and has 6 touchdowns on them, which is tied for 2nd most in the league. His .91 EPA per dropback is 4th. The Rams have tied for allowing the most deep touchdowns at 7 and have given up the 4th highest completion percentage over expected on them. Since week 8, Matthew Stafford has netted 628 passing yards on downfield, so those are 10-plus air yard attempts, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. His completion percentage went to 55 from 43, and his yards per attempt went from 9.4 to 11.2. One more point on each defense here because this is such a great game. Jalen Carter has 29 pressures when aligned as an interior defensive lineman, with 15 coming in under 2.5 seconds. Both of those numbers rank top 5 in the league. Carter is also the only DT who's generated multiple pressures in every game they've played in this season. The Rams have pressured opposing passers at the highest rate in the NFL. Jared Verse has made it to 50 pressures, and Braden Fisk is at 28. And by the way, those are just the rookies. Bottom line, Eagles win 26-22. The run game forecast to be difficult for the Rams, which drives my score. They've attempted 57% of rushes between the tackles, which is the 4th highest rate, and they've generated the 4th fewest rushing yards over expected. The Eagles' defense happens to be 4th best at limiting such rushing yards over expected. I also cannot help myself, but Cooper DeJean has played 87% of Philadelphia's defensive snaps since their Week 5 bye, and he's allowed just 104 yards on 26 targets when lined up in the slot. That is the fewest yards allowed as the nearest defender among slot cornerbacks with at least 25 targets. This game ranks 9th of 13 in confidence. And last but not least, we don't even need to leave SoFi. Monday Night Football is a Harbaugh brother off when John comes to town as a 3-point favorite over Jim in a game where the over-under is 51. The real question I have here is, do they both wear cleats or is it just Jim? I need to find out. I will report back. This is very important information. However, my favorite piece of information is probably this next point. Baltimore, the defense, may want to sit back in split safety looks pre-snap because the Chargers' passing game has gotten hot recently. If they do, the numbers still favor the Ravens. In other words, they won't be compromising their extremely stingy run defense, even if they're more mindful of the pass defense. The Ravens have allowed 3.3 yards per carry with light boxes versus designed runs this season. That's second fewest of any defense since 2016. Further, they've allowed a 10-plus yard rush on just 2 of 88 carries defended with the light box. That's 2.3%, the lowest rate of the past 9 seasons. And the Chargers have earned the second fewest EPA per carry against light boxes, and they have the 3rd lowest rushing success rate in this situation. To simplify, perhaps they have some surplus value in their run defense that they can devote an extra body to help defend the pass, because it seems like in this situation against the Chargers, they really wouldn't be losing any efficiency. Super cool information. I love this point. Can we give Will Dissly some love here? I mean, in the first half of last week's game against the Bengals, they really had no answer for him, and that's not the first time this season that he's been a big factor. In fact, he's led the team in targets and end zone targets since Week 7 and ranks 5th in yards per route run among all tight ends league-wide this season. Baltimore's defense has also seen the most targets and allowed the most receptions to tight ends this season. Bottom line, this is a thread the needle game for me. I have the Ravens by just 1 point, 25-24 in my median model. Remember, that's the regular one we use. That's where this game ranks 12th of 13 in confidence. In my ATS model, the Ravens win by 4. What on earth is the difference? It is largely to do with Derrick Henry. The Chargers have allowed just 3 rushing touchdowns all season, but they rank low on the quality of offenses that they face list, meaning they haven't played the hardest teams. This is a small sample size, but you need to have all the information because Derrick Henry has faced number 1 scoring defenses as the leading rusher in the NFL when entering the game 2 times in his career, including the playoffs. His Titans were 2-0 in those games, and he had over 140 rushing yards and at least 1 rushing touchdown in each game. He also had at least 1 rushing touchdown in each game this season, which is the longest streak since Jerry Rice in 1987. To simplify, if you believe they can slow Henry down, then take the Chargers with the 3 points. If you don't, then it's Ravens by 4. On to the spicy and bland menu for this week. Bland first. Remember, these are props that happen in at least 55% of my simulations. I went 2 of 4 here last week, so let's step it up. Number 1, Keyshawn Boutte to earn more than 32.5 receiving yards against the Dolphins. He's averaged 16.5 air yards per target since May became the starter in Week 6, the 3rd most of any player with at least 20 targets over that span. Plus, his name is very fun to say. Number 2, Saquon Barkley takes a trip to the end zone against the Rams. Do I need to add more here? Just Saquon Barkley, touchdown. Number 3, Tyreek Hill to also see the end zone. The Patriots have allowed 12 passing touchdowns in their past 6 games. Okay, the spicies. Remember, these happen in at least 48% of simulations, but have a good amount of volatility, so the juice is worth the squeeze. Remember to mix and match 2 blands and a spicy for a regular amount of risk, or 2 spicies and a bland if you prefer more upside, which is usually how I like it. Went 2 of 3 here last week, so let's see if we can go 3 of 3 this week. Spicy number 1. Cortland Sutton to catch more than 4.5 passes. I would love to say touchdown here too, but we've seen Bo Nix spread it around quite a bit. Spicy number 2, Mike Evans to earn more than 50.5 receiving yards. This is spicy because he's coming off an injury. Spicy number 3, Jaden Daniels to run for more than 39.5 yards. It's a great opportunity to run against the Cowboys, but it's spicy because given his potential for not having 100% healed ribs, his OC could advise to let the backs handle it more. I cannot believe that next week is already Thanksgiving. Where's the time gone? 12 weeks in already. I can't even believe it. Anyways, the best side in Thanksgiving is absolutely stuffing. It's not even close, but all hot takes on food aside, we do have some schedule changes next week because there are 4 games, so 3 on Thanksgiving and then 1 on Black Friday, even before the weekend starts. And as for the win total extra episode, we will still have it. It just will probably be modified to a who makes the playoff episode, which is pretty rad. I just want to be nice to my guest. Time is so precious and it's so hard to schedule, so it'll be worth the wait. I got you. Don't worry about it. All of my projections and scores are up for you to use as you wish as of Wednesday, November 20th. Remember, they update daily with the injury reports and news. I already had to update it with George Kittle news, for example. And thank you so much for coming to hang out. I always appreciate all of your comments, our dialogue. Please keep it coming. This is our show. And if you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and share it with some friends so we can continue to grow.